What is up, guys, and welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be talking about an important topic, and that is PoKeMON, the TV show, is propaganda. And I would have never seen it before when I was younger, but now that I know the truth about this world, and believe me, the authorities of the world are lying to you about pretty much everything. And as I got older, I started learning the governments of the world and secret societies and the billionaires are colluding together and scheming and making us think that, oh, this country's against this country or this group's against that group, but they're really all together and they're teaching all of us nonsense, and we waste our lives in the school system believing in lies. The propaganda that this PoKeMON show is pushing is evolution, and that is a lie. And I know that the earth is young, and I know that there was a worldwide flood. So let's go over all the evidence of evolution. And this show is propaganda to get into the minds of the children and push the evolution idea. And that's the only reason that it was designed. So the governments of the world, they said, we need to make a cartoon that has some good propaganda for evolution. And they do this with a lot of stuff. The governments are, I don't know exactly who's at the top, but I know there's these family members, these billionaire family members, 1 trillionaire family. And there's a lot of people involved in these groups, right? From politicians to military people, but they use the movies and television shows or even video games to push propaganda into the minds of the unsuspecting youth. But let's talk about evolution. Okay, so I know that there was a worldwide flood about 4,500 years ago that completely destroyed the earth, and I'm going to go through all the lists of evolution and the official mainstream points that they give in Google, in textbooks, when I was growing up, taught in school, and just go over how all of it's nonsense. So evolution is the process by which different kinds of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from earlier forms during the history of the earth. And the second one they give is the gradual development of something, especially from a simple to a more complex form. So this is the same lie that Satan told in the Garden of Eden to Eve first, that man could become God and ascend and evolve into a god one day. So this is exactly the same lie that Satan told in the Garden of Eden, that we could evolve and become better. And let's go over what their mainstream evolutions are. So answers are. So let's see the proofs. I want to see here, what is let's type, what is 5 evidence of evolution? What are 5 evidence of evolution? There are 5 lines of evidence that support evolution. The fossil record, okay, biogeography. So I guess that's something to do with the earth, layering, comparative anatomy. So they're comparing the anatomy of animals previous and current. Comparative embryology. So they're comparing the embryos. And molecular biology. So I guess that would be at a molecular level, maybe with genetics, I don't know. Okay, so let's go through this. Fossils. So fossils, they cannot be used as evidence due to the lack of evidence to support knowledge of breeding. So if you found an ancient creature buried in the earth and you dug it up, you could not know it there's no way you could know that this animal successfully bred and passed on its genetic code to its offspring, so that this could actually evolve in the future, okay, or gain some kind of new adaptation. And let's see here. Fossil record. So there is no fossil record. Like, let's see, they have one good photo over here that they have of horses I took. Okay, so they show this in textbooks. They'll show like this is the fossil record apparently, and they don't have a fossil record. There's tons of missing links, but they'll say they found this leg bone of a horse, a current horse, and then they've compared it to horses they found in the ground, and if the animal was buried deeper within in the earth, then it's good to assume that it's older, but that's still an assumption. And then they're comparing the bone structures, and they're saying, yeah, this looks similar to the bone of a horse that we have currently, so it looks like this might be a prehistoric horse that's a little smaller. And then they'll continually go down the line and find smaller and smaller bone structures that look similar to a horse. Now, this is not evidence for evolution. First of all, we're not seeing anything change, and I know the answer is always going to be, but you need a lot of time. So it's not really, that's like, that's shifting the burden of proof. It's like, there's no way I could prove that because we would always need enough time. We never have enough time to, say if you found these bones, say, okay, I'm not even going to say like they found these actually, because I'd have to see them myself. They would like to show, most of the time when fossils are found, they will just find, one little finger bone, and then they'll drop a whole vertebrate, a whole mammal out of just one little finger bone. So they're essentially using an artist to make up the whole, how the animal even looks like. And I saw this very interesting. It was talking about the fossil record, and it said that 95% of all discovered fossils are marine invertebrates, mostly shellfish. 95%. That's a huge portion. And now let's go down. Look, 4.75% are algae and plants. It's even less than a percent. 0.2375% are non-marine invertebrates and insects. Okay, now we go to bigger animals, like, like horses and stuff. 0.01%, 0.0125% are vertebrates, fish, birds, and mammals. And only 0.0025 of all unearthed vertebrates consist of more than a single bone. So only 0.0025 of all unearthed vertebrates. So look at the percentage of vertebrates that are found. Only 0.25 of them consist of a single bone, of more than a single bone. So most of them are just a single bone. Okay, so if that's not a red flag to you, then I don't know what to tell you. And they'll get a bunch of they'll dig up a bunch of bones, and it's gonna be a huge mess. And most of the time, they're just gonna be guessing in the dark. They're gonna be just putting it together randomly and hope it looks like some prehistoric creature. Where was this going towards? Oh yeah. Okay, so back to this horse one. I'm not saying that these animals couldn't have existed, even though on this chart I would doubt that the last two were part of this, because I do believe that there are a common ancestry between, like, say, birds had a common ancestor before it was a bird. But to say that a bacteria or a single cell organism evolved into a fish over millions of years and then turned into like a lizard and then crawled out of the ocean and then turned into like a reptile, and then the reptile turned into a mammal and the mammal turned into a monkey and the monkey turned into a human, that's just too far stretching. Okay, so like if we go back to these bottom two prehistoric animals, I'm gonna say that I don't think that this little animal here turned into a horse. Okay, because the animals that were created in the beginning, designed by God, he made the animals, and then they of course adapted. Of course they can adapt and they can change slightly. Like example, we can still breed dogs now, and the common ancestor for dogs are a wolf, ancient wolves, right? Man domesticated wolves, and we started breeding them to bring out certain traits or to strengthen or to mute certain traits in their genetic code to make them look more acute or make them have a certain strength to do some work or make them more aggressive. But in the end, it was still a dog, okay, before. It wasn't some weird little animal that turned into a dog. And they don't even have intermediary fossils. So, example, they want to show that a monkey evolved from, let's just say, some kind of rodent creature. So they would have to show bones, sets of bones laying side by side, progressing that, okay, this is the rodent, and then the next generations, maybe a few thousand years later, it's starting to grow some kind of adaptation because it's starting to jump for fruit in the trees. So it's starting to gain larger legs, and it's in the next bone structure, its tail is starting to get a little longer, and the next one, it's starting to look more like a monkey, and then the final one is a monkey. And they could all be maybe hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years apart. I mean, okay, maybe that's too far to find a fossil, but hundreds of thousands of years. No, they found bones that were allegedly millions of years old. So let's see, these sets of bones were millions of years apart, but they're all showing the transition from a rodent creature that's evolving slowly over time into a monkey. But they don't have these intermediary fossils. These are called missing links. It's not a missing link we're not missing a link. We're missing the whole chain. So there's nothing that fossils will give us as evidence of evolution, guys. Also, if you want to talk about the actual age of the actual creature, they use certain dating like C14 or radiometric dating, or let's talk about carbon dating. They're all inaccurate. Like, they're all flawed. Example with C14, our atmosphere contains carbon, and carbon is released into the atmosphere, and ancient animals and plants absorb the carbon, and then another animal can come and eat those animals and plants and keep them in their digestive tract. And then when we find the fossil, we can carbon date them and the food they've eaten, and we can measure the amount of C14 in that, and we can actually measure the rate of decay, which is called a half-life. I don't remember how many thousands of years, 1400 years or 1200 years, but every certain amount of thousands of years, every set amount of time, this amount of C14 will half, and that's called a half-life. And then scientists can measure this amount of C14 and the rate of decay quite accurately, so they can get an age more or less of when the animal died. But it's taking an assumption that they're saying that the carbon that is in they're assuming that the carbon amount in our atmosphere currently today is the same as it was way long ago, and that's a massive assumption. There probably was more carbon back in the day because a lot of the plants and trees and vegetation were a lot larger. So that's massive assumptions right there. So that's why carbon dating could never work. It's flawed, and there are tons of examples that show different animals found in the same burial site that are different ages when they're clearly buried in the same layer or same time. Or they showed a frozen mammoth where its skin on the outside was older than another part of its body, like like its leg was older than its head, you know what I mean, by thousands of years. Or they've carbon dated live animals such as snails and shown that they were thousands of years old when they're still alive. So carbon dating is flawed, and it's completely, you can't say that you can use any kind of radiometric dating to date anything. Let's just talk about evolution again. The evolution theory is flawed in so many ways, and they have no answers for anything. It's just like a guessing game to the scientists. It's just a psi operation to make mankind not believe in God and believe that they can be evolving and make a society of selfish people that won't care about each other and will push the boundaries of scientific pursuit to try to make themselves evolve and more powerful, so that we can escape this realm that God made, because it is enclosed, and that we could ascend and become gods ourselves. That is what these leaders of the world believe. They actually believe in God, but they want to overthrow him because they think he is evil, and he's not. Anyways, I'll continue now. The evolution theory, they're flawed in, let's break it down into 6 different types of evolution. There's cosmic evolution. So how did they talk about the Big Bang, which has a lot of problems in itself. Like, where did the energy come from? What exploded? Chemical evolution. So they're talking about how we have all these different types of elements, and that they expect all of us to believe that hydrogen was the base element, and all these elements evolved from hydrogen, from some kind of cataclysm, some explosion, some kind of heat or fusion. But are you kidding me? Then they're talking about stellar evolution. So they say that stars evolve, but we've never seen any process of any star evolving or even forming. So they say that stars can form, but there is no evidence of stars forming. And I don't even believe in space as it is currently taught, so I'm not even going to go deep into that.
Went through evolution, convincing the crowds that aliens somehow are out there and bound to have all of the answers and power to know the solution. Like indigo children, smarter than humans, more intuition, much more evolved. They're sending a vision, prepare the whole world with a false explanation. If we're to evolve, we must remove Christians. They call it the cleansing, and this is their mission.
Evolve or die refers to whether humanity survives as a species.
Let's see, organic evolution, the origin of life. So I remember I saw this experiment done in a lab where they put some basic chemicals into some kind of tubes, and they, did some heat and released gas into it, and, increased the temperature, and they came up with this slime. And the slime is supposedly had like 2 amino acids, but we need like 28 amino acids to have the basic blocks of human life, or basic life. So wrong. A single cell. If you think a single cell organism is simple, you're wrong.
Evolution teaches that bacteria were one of the first life forms to evolve from chemicals. Many bacteria propel themselves with a type of miniature motor called a flagellum. These extremely efficient reversible motors rotate up to 100,000 revolutions per minute. While bacteria are small, they are not simple.
Have you heard of the flagellum? A natural engine powered by a proton medium. It's a motorized bacterium that rotates up to 100,000 RPM. That's rotations per minute, and it can instantly reverse. We make nothing equivalent. 1/1,000,000th of an inch in diameter. Everything man-made is inferior to the superior technology. See the handiwork of God in molecular biology. Irreducibly complex. If any one part's removed, it would not exist. Analogous to a mousetrap, it cannot snap without corresponding parts that react. No transition could survive transformation. Mutations gain no genetic information. Cause minds what cannot be seen with the naked eye, like the gyroscopes in a housefly. Let's biomimic these agilities and make a jet plane that flies with the same capabilities. Dig to reveal the roots of technology. Dig to separate truth from mythology. Dig to unveil a modern day mystery.
This could change the course of human history.
Dig to reveal the roots of technology. Dig to separate truth from mythology.
Single cell organism is quite complex, and if you made one like a giant, it would be like a spaceship, super high tech. Like a flagellum is like a little single cell organism. It has like a little rotary, like kind of like a motor inside of it, and actually spins and has a RPM. And if you actually increase the size of that thing and put it in the water, it would be so fast that modern tech couldn't even keep up with it, because the natural technology that God made is more intelligent than anything man could ever make, and that's why man copies nature. That's how we get our epiphanies from, right? Okay, let's talk about macroevolution. So changing from one type of animal to another, like example, a horse to a whale. And they said that they say that the whale evolution, the fossils, they have a really good. Where is that? I want to see that thing. It says whales have excellent examples of fossil evidence, because whales have excellent fossil records. We can see their transition perfectly. Yeah, right. It's all lies. And now the last one for they call it microevolution. I would just call it adaptions, but saying like a big dog turned to a little dog. Over time, selective breeding, right? That's possible. So I'm saying that's possible, but the rest of them are not possible. Now, another evidence they say is they're comparing bone structures. Comparative anatomy. So comparing the bone structures of anatomical parts of animals from prehistoric to now, and how they have similar structures. This is just saying like that God, it's the same thing as saying like there's a one designer and he just designed them all his way. And yeah, they might have similar structures because he's a common designer. Okay, it doesn't have to be common ancestry, it could be common designer. And this is the same thing as the thing with genetics. So they're saying genetic similarities in the gene code this does not indicate common ancestry of a more basic prehistoric creature evolving and improving. Is indicative of a common designer. So similarities in gene code, similarities in anatomy are all indicative of a common designer, a creator who designed all of them. I think it was like and now let's move on to comparative embryology. So they will state that the similarities of embryos of animals and humans implies evolution. However, it's the same as before, as a common designer. Also, they're still using Ernst Haeckel's fake embryo drawings. So this one guy, he's a scientist and he was an artist, and he went around and pretty much converted all Germany into believing the fake evolution theory, which is why they believed in that Jewish people and blacks were inferior and that they were more highly advanced, because that's what evolution teaches. It teaches that there are certain humans that are higher evolved and that we're better, right? But that's not true. And I can't believe it. Still to this day, they're still using Ernst Haeckel's fake embryo drawings in textbooks, saying that that's proof of evolution. They'll say stuff like Another evidence of evolution is, example, adaptations. So there's one example they had of moths. They did one experiment. They had this coal factory set up somewhere in the States. They said, okay, we're gonna want you guys to count the number of moths that they had. These moths that were on the trees, and I think it was they were black. They were supposed to be brown to blend in with the trees, but then since the coal factory was set up in the area, they started finding black ones, and they're saying, oh, this is proof of evolution because they're adapting to the surroundings. But again, this is like an animal, like in, say, a rabbit or a fox in the Alaska. They get a thick, full winter coat in winter. It's white, and then when the snow melts, their fur goes dark and turns back to their original dark gray brown color, and their thick fur falls off in the summer. So is that evolution? No, that's just adaptations. Actually, what they did was they actually faked that. They took a picture, a bunch of moths, and what they did was they caught a bunch of moths and just glued them to the tree. I feel sorry for those moths, and they took the photo to show that, oh yeah, look, now that the factory's closed down, there's more brown ones returning. But again, these government agencies and these scientists always have to lie to hide the fact that the age of the earth is accurate with the Bible, that evolution is false, and that creation is the more viable answer. And let's just continue here. So I talked about carbon dating, and it's flawed because it uses assumptions. And oh yes, so another one is about viruses. So viruses becoming more resistant to certain drugs cannot be used as evolution, as the virus is losing information. That's the exact same answer as like a monkey that's losing the tail and became us. Why would we lose the tail? Isn't evolution supposed to show us that we're gaining something, not losing something? So why don't they show us an example of evolution taking place, an example of evolution where we're gaining something? There is no evidence of evolution. And let's see, what else do they talk about? I mean, it's just like, there's nothing. They have nothing. Let's continue with these images that I have here. And they'll talk about the geologic column. And if there's no geological column anywhere. If they did, it would be miles and miles thick. And they always talk about the layering, the organization of the fossils found in the like they say that, oh, there are layers in the earth, and there are certain things found at the bottom, and there are certain things found at the top. So that's saying that these things are older in the bottom and these things are younger at the top. Well, in a worldwide flood, the sediment would be all rearranged instantly. In a matter of weeks, all of the soil would be organized in layers. And I mean, what about the relative weight, the density of these bones? Like, couldn't some of the heavier stuff be kicked up higher up? You know what I mean? Like, example, you have a box of cereal. It has some raisins in it. It's a brand cereal. And the only way to get the raisins out is to shake it. You know, shake it. The raisins start coming up. You know what I mean? So there's so many things, especially if a worldwide catastrophe like the tectonic plates, the earth cracked open and a bunch of water came out. And it started raining and stormy, and the swirling waters, oceans that covered the whole highest mountain. That would definitely rearrange the fossils and move them all around. And anyway, fossils found across the world is proof that they were rapidly buried. You can make fossils now. There was a guy, he was like someone was buried in some really dry, near Texas or something, really dry area, something about the salt content in the actual soil, and they found that they actually were fossilized. Part of the person's loved one was fossilized. So there's tons of evidence of trees fossilizing in amount of decades. Or if you think about hydrologic sorting, all the heavier rocks would fall to the bottom, and unless something was shook, right? Which could have happened, and everything could have been organized. The finer layers would be top, and the bones, could have been organized any way. So, and they say that, clams and seashells are found at the bottom. Well, that's where they live. Birds are found at the top because they could avoid, and man are found at the top because we could avoid the rising waters, flood waters, until the very end. Now, something else I was going to talk about was about these layerings again. Fossils. Oh yeah. So we can measure the amount of salt in the ocean. There's a lot of ways we can find out the Earth is young, but one of them is, like, why are the oceans not saltier? Because back in the day, in the old days, the water, if you don't believe it or not, the oceans were actually fresh water, and you could actually sail across the ocean and drink the water that you were sitting on, so that you could have longer voyages. That would enable longer voyages. And once the flood happened, it kind of made the water a little salty because there are minerals in the earth that drained into the oceans. And we are actually, every year, the oceans are getting saltier because 30% of all the rainwater, or the runoff water, goes into the ocean and brings more minerals. So if we can measure the rate of salinity in the oceans and the rate of how salty it's getting, then why are they not saltier if the Earth's millions of years old or billions of years old? And why is there not more dirt in the oceans? There's not that much dirt in the oceans, guys. We can find bedrock pretty quick. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. Like, Pokemon is just a propaganda show, and they show these Pokemon, they evolve like instantly. They just, in a flash of light. And that's what scientists will propose, that they're like, I don't know exactly the term, but I'll just call it spontaneous evolution, where they can't find any of the intermediate fossils. So they'll just say, an alligator, he had an egg and a bird came out. Spontaneous evolution. So the animal, maybe not to that degree, but they'll say the animal just came out of birth with that right away. So there was no gradual change needed, because this mammal just spontaneously evolved, and he was the one who had all the different traits. So there was no gradual fossils found. That's why. Like, they'll say anything just to back up their theory. And if you go to the latter form, if you think about things evolving slowly over time, like, say, example, an organ in the human body, like, how would one of those organs evolve? And if you look into it deep, you couldn't have just a little piece of this organ be there, because it wouldn't have all the parts needed to function. So it would just be a dead weight. Some part of the body is trying to change over time slowly. It would be a hindrance if it wasn't ready. In theory, if some animal was evolving and it wasn't fully evolved, it would be most likely to be killed because it wasn't ready to use that adaptation. So then that's the big problem for the scientists. So they'll say, it's just spontaneous evolution, right? And if you look at even the human eye, like, it's so advanced, it's so high tech. Like, how could it have evolved, right? From something simple to something to this? Like, where do you start? And some things in the human body and some things in the human body, they need to function together. So they couldn't have existed with one without the other. And there are a lot of relationships in symbiotic relationships in the nature, where one of these creatures or plants couldn't exist without the other. So what evolved first? What came first? That goes back to the star thing. Like, what came first? The elements to make the stars, or the stars to make the elements? Because they say that when stars explode, that they may create other heavier elements, which is nonsense. Back to that spontaneous evolution. So they say that, I was looking at another channel called RAE channel. It was Revolution Against Evolution. And they're a great channel. Not too many views because they're being hidden, like every truther on YouTube. But they were looking at chemistry, and they're saying that when you look deeper into the chemical bonds of elements and the actual number of shells they have, and the number of electrons spinning around them, orbiting, you're gonna see that it gets more and more and more complicated. That there's no way it could be an accident. You know, there's so many coincidences that have to take place for some chemical bonds to happen, for some elements to be created, or for some things to be reactions to take place, that it's too much coincidence to be, random. And if you think about everything's energy and frequency, and our DNA is information. And everything's information. Information can only come from mind. Now, I think I want to talk about something else, vestigial structures, where they say that we've evolved and we don't need this part of our body anymore. To talk about like whales, I think they have these little bones in their pelvis, and the whales, they'll be saying that these whales, those used to be their legs, but they evolved out of it. But those are little bones that are anchoring points that the whales use for breeding. So they just clearly lie about these vestigial structures. Like, they'll say our appendix, or what was that? Our appendix isn't useful, or let me just search here. Useless appendages. Human organs. Oh, they said the tailbone. The tailbone is useless, but they said that it's actually, Ken Hovind, he said that it's actually very important. We need this, and if you don't think it's useful, he'll pay to get yours removed. Look, muscle fibers that produce goosebumps. We don't need that? Why? Because we can make clothing? We still need to keep warm. That's completely retarded. What was that one that people were getting removed when I was a kid? Yeah, like the human appendix, they found out now that it's actually important to, what holds beneficial bacteria. Or like, what is that other one? There's another one that people were getting taken out when they were younger. Like the tonsils and stuff like that. Like, well, regardless, there's one that I remember that people would take it out of their body, but actually it helps with your immune system. So yeah, you could live without it, but you need it. It's easier to have it. So there's a lot of things in the textbooks that are lies, just straight up lies. And I'm even holding some of these old fossils in my hand right now. I have a fossil ammonite. I have a trilobite, and I have a sea urchin. And let's just read the little card here it comes with. From the mid-Cambrian period, this is for the trilobite, 550 million years ago, trilobites are an extinct form of marine life occurring in the Wheeler Shale. These many-legged arthropods roam the sandy bottoms of the seas and coral reefs in search for food. Trilobites were the first invertebrate form of life, of real life on Earth, found in House Range, Antelope Springs, what is that? Utah. Millard Cove, Utah. Now, I want to say that these three things I'm holding, all of these things are still alive today. People have found live ammonites. People have found live trilobites. Okay, so don't tell me that these are prehistoric.
By recent downpours, an unusual creature has been discovered. This is the tadpole shrimp. Considered a living fossil, the tadpole shrimp species is over 200 million years old.
I've been living here for 37 years. In all those years, I saw such ponds for only 3 or 4 times. There was no water most of the time.
The trouble with trilobites is pretty much the same trouble we have with understanding why any animal that was once so abundant can totally disappear. Because trilobites were survivors. The history of these creatures shows that they practically invented survival. In order for them to finally go extinct and leave no direct descendants, nature had to try to kill them like 4 different times. Let's start about 540 million years ago, just before the dawn of the Cambrian period.
Did this coelacanth really go extinct millions of years ago? Well, that's what they thought until she found one and this guy caught one. Same with this frill shark, thought to be extinct for millions of years, just found swimming in Japan. Download our app for more evidence of the biblical creation account.
Because that's what they're telling me, and I used to believe that when I was a kid. And they say that relative dating strata are used to tell the relative age of fossils within each layer. So that's assuming that there was no global flood to mess up the layers. That's assuming, okay? There's more evidence of a worldwide flood than there's more evidence of the Earth being millions and millions of years old. Like they'll find sea animals, seashells, petrified, and clams closed, petrified, meaning that they were buried immediately. So because when they died, the shells opened, but they were killed immediately and they died with closed, and they're found on top of mountains like Mount Everest. And you could say, oh yeah, that used to be an ancient ocean, and then over millions of years the tectonic plates moved and pushed the mountain up. Or you could just say there was an ancient flood. Okay, they found petrified trees, thousands of petrified trees standing upright, connecting all these layers that are supposed to be different ages. When a tree gets knocked into a lake or a body of water, it most likely will petrify, because it will get waterlogged, it will sink to the bottom, and it will stand up, it will like pierce the soil, pierce the dirt, the loose soil underground. If there was a flood, the soil down there would be kind of loose, and it would be able to stick down. Not even if it was heavy enough, it would stick right into the mud and the dirt and stand upright. And if you're saying that that tree is millions of years old, then it would have to be standing for millions of years old without falling down and rotting like normal trees do. So again, the leaders of our world are pushing these propagandas, these lies, and I could pick out any video game, probably any movie, and just tell you what is their agenda being pushed in this media. Okay, thank you for watching. I'm sorry it was so long.
That's one of my favorite quotes that a significant portion of the Earth's population will soon recognize, if they haven't already done so, that humanity is now faced with a stark choice: evolve